Political scandals and crises have forced some of the world's most powerful leaders to step down. Today, we're diving into 10 infamous resignations that reshaped nations and left lasting impacts on global politics. Buckle up as we uncover the scandals, uprisings, and crises that led to 10 world leaders forced to step down. Richard Nixon, United States, 1974. Richard Nixon's resignation in 1974 was a political earthquake that shook the United States to its core. The Watergate scandal began as a break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in 1972. As the investigation unfolded, it was revealed that Nixon had been involved in the cover-up of the break-in, along with other illegal activities orchestrated by members of his administration. The scandal grew as tapes were discovered, implicating Nixon in attempts to obstruct justice. Key figures in Nixon's administration were indicted, and the evidence against the president mounted. Facing near-certain impeachment by Congress, Nixon became the first U.S. president to resign from office on August 8, 1974. His departure left the nation grappling with a deep mistrust of its political leaders and underscored the importance of accountability in government. The scandal also had a profound impact on American journalism, highlighting the role of investigative reporting in uncovering corruption. Nixon's resignation paved the way for Gerald Ford to assume the presidency, who controversially pardoned Nixon, sparking further debate and division within the country. Margaret Thatcher, United Kingdom, 1990. Margaret Thatcher faced her downfall in 1990 after over a decade in power. Her introduction of the poll tax, a flat-rate tax on every adult regardless of income, led to widespread protests and riots. This policy was highly unpopular and contributed to a significant loss of support within her own Conservative Party. Additionally, her firm stance on European integration alienated many of her colleagues. The leadership contest within her party became increasingly intense, with many viewing her as a polarizing figure who could no longer unite the party or the country. In November 1990, Thatcher's cabinet ministers began to turn against her, and she faced a leadership challenge from Michael Heseltine. Although she won the first round of voting, she failed to secure a sufficient majority, prompting her resignation. Thatcher's departure marked the end of an era in British politics and underscored the fragility of political power, even for a leader with a decade-long tenure. Suharto, Indonesia, 1998. Suharto's resignation in 1998 ended over 3 decades of authoritarian rule in Indonesia. His regime, characterized by significant economic growth but also by rampant corruption and human rights abuses, eventually succumbed to the Asian financial crisis. The economic collapse triggered mass protests and civil unrest, with Indonesians demanding political reform and Suharto's resignation. The crisis led to skyrocketing inflation and unemployment, causing widespread suffering among the populace. Facing mounting pressure, including from within his own government, Suharto announced his resignation in May 1998. His departure ushered in a new era of democratic reforms for Indonesia, though the transition was fraught with challenges. Suharto's fall from power highlighted the volatile nature of authoritarian regimes, particularly when confronted with economic crises and popular discontent. His resignation remains a pivotal moment in Southeast Asian history, marking the beginning of Indonesia's journey toward democracy, as subsequent leaders work to dismantle the entrenched systems of corruption and build a more open and accountable government. Slobodan Milosevic, Yugoslavia/Serbia, 2000. Slobodan Milosevic, a key figure in the Yugoslav wars, was forced to step down in 2000 after the bulldozer revolution. His regime, marked by ethnic conflict and allegations of war crimes, faced increasing domestic and international pressure. The disputed presidential elections in September 2000 sparked massive protests, with citizens demanding an end to Milosevic's rule. The opposition, united under the Democratic Opposition of Serbia, played a crucial role in mobilizing the public against him. On October 5, 2000, the streets of Belgrade were filled with protesters, and the symbol of the revolution, a bulldozer, was famously used to break into the state television building. Milosevic was left with no choice but to resign. His departure marked a significant turning point for Serbia, leading to democratic reforms and eventually his extradition to The Hague to face war crimes charges. The bulldozer revolution demonstrated the power of collective action and the enduring quest for justice and democracy. It also marked the end of an era of nationalist policies and violent conflicts in the region, paving the way for Serbia's path toward integration with European institutions. Silvio Berlusconi, Italy, 2011. Silvio Berlusconi, Italy's flamboyant and controversial prime minister, resigned in 2011 amid a debt crisis and numerous personal scandals. His tenure was marked by legal battles, accusations of corruption, and a media empire that often blurred the lines between his political and business interests. As Italy faced economic turmoil, Berlusconi's leadership came under intense scrutiny, both domestically and internationally. The European debt crisis exacerbated Italy's financial woes, and Berlusconi's government struggled to implement effective reforms. Under mounting pressure from the markets, European leaders, and a coalition of political opponents, Berlusconi finally stepped down in November 2011. His resignation was a dramatic conclusion to a career that had dominated Italian politics for nearly 2 decades. Despite his departure, Berlusconi remained a polarizing figure in Italian politics, symbolizing the complex interplay between media, business, and political power. His resignation opened the door for technocratic leadership aimed at stabilizing Italy's economy and restoring international confidence in its governance. Hosni Mubarak, Egypt, 2011. Hosni Mubarak's resignation in 2011 was a landmark moment in the Arab Spring, a series of uprisings that swept across the Middle East. Mubarak had ruled Egypt with an iron fist for 30 years, but his regime was increasingly seen as corrupt and repressive. Inspired by the successful revolution in Tunisia, Egyptians took to the streets in January 2011, demanding an end to Mubarak's rule. The protests, centered in Cairo's Tahrir Square, quickly gained momentum, drawing millions of participants. Despite initial attempts to quell the unrest with concessions and violence, Mubarak's grip on power continued to weaken. After 18 days of intense protests and international pressure, Mubarak announced his resignation on February 11, 2011. His departure was celebrated as a victory for the people, but it also left Egypt facing significant challenges in its transition to democracy. Mubarak's fall highlighted the power of popular movements in challenging entrenched autocracies and reshaping political landscapes. The transitional period saw the rise of new political forces, the drafting of a new constitution, and ongoing struggles to establish a stable and democratic government. Viktor Yanukovych, Ukraine, 2014. Viktor Yanukovych's presidency came to an abrupt end in 2014 following the Euromaidan protests. Yanukovych's decision to abandon an association agreement with the European Union in favor of closer ties with Russia sparked widespread outrage. The protests, which began in November 2013, escalated into a broader movement against corruption and authoritarianism. The situation intensified in February 2014, when violent clashes between protesters and security forces resulted in numerous deaths. Facing mounting pressure and losing the support of key allies, Yanukovych fled Kyiv on February 22, 2014, ultimately seeking refuge in Russia. His departure marked a turning point in Ukraine's history, leading to significant political changes and heightened tensions with Russia. The Euromaidan movement underscored the desire for democratic reforms and alignment with European standards, setting the stage for ongoing conflicts and geopolitical struggles in the region. Yanukovych's ousting led to the annexation of Crimea by Russia and ongoing conflict in eastern Ukraine, significantly altering the geopolitical landscape of Eastern Europe. Yoshihide Suga, Japan, 2021. Yoshihide Suga's brief tenure as Japan's prime minister ended in 2021 amid low approval ratings and criticism over his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and the Tokyo Olympics. Suga, who succeeded Shinzo Abe, faced enormous challenges as Japan grappled with the pandemic's impact. His government's response, particularly the slow vaccine rollout and perceived lack of leadership, drew widespread criticism from the public and political opponents. Many felt that the government's messaging was inconsistent and that there was insufficient support for the healthcare system and economic relief for those affected by the pandemic. As the Tokyo Olympics approached, Suga faced additional scrutiny over the decision to proceed with the Games despite the pandemic. Public dissatisfaction continued to grow, and Suga's approval ratings plummeted. In September 2021, he announced that he would not seek re-election as leader of the Liberal Democratic Party, effectively resigning as prime minister. Suga's resignation underscored the significant challenges Japan faced in managing both a public health crisis and a major international event under intense global scrutiny. His departure opened the way for new leadership as Japan continued to navigate the complexities of pandemic recovery and economic stabilization. Boris Johnson, United Kingdom, 2022. Boris Johnson's tenure as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom came to a tumultuous end in 2022. His leadership was marred by a series of scandals, including the infamous Partygate, where it was revealed that Johnson and his staff held parties at 10 Downing Street during COVID-19 lockdowns. The public outrage over these revelations, coupled with ongoing criticisms of his handling of the pandemic, significantly eroded his support. Critics argued that Johnson's actions displayed a disregard for the rules and a lack of accountability, fueling widespread discontent. The final blow came when key members of Johnson's cabinet resigned, citing a loss of confidence in his leadership. With mounting pressure from his party and the public, Johnson announced his resignation in July 2022. His departure marked a dramatic end to a premiership characterized by its unconventional style and numerous controversies. His resignation set the stage for a leadership contest within the Conservative Party, ultimately leading to a new direction for the UK government. Johnson would be just one of 3 Conservative prime ministers to step down in the space of 3 years, with this video being longer than Liz Truss's reign alone. Joe Biden, United States, 2024. In July 2024, President Joe Biden decided not to seek re-election in 2024, seemingly due to health concerns following a recent COVID-19 diagnosis. Biden's announcement was just one of many shocking events within weeks, including an attempted assassination of his opponent, Donald Trump, by Thomas Matthew Crooks. This turbulent period highlights the intense and often chaotic nature of modern American politics. His stepping down also led to significant political shifts and speculations about the future direction of the Democratic Party.